Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Tom Shaughnessy. I'm one of the hosts of the podcast and I help lead Delphi Ventures. Today I have a really galaxy brain panel here. It's actually in a conference room for those watching the video. I have Chad on from the THORChain team, Duncan from Immunefi, Gavin from Nine Realms, and Robert and Steven from Halborn here to talk about THORChain, previous hack, how the protocol has become a lot hardened and safer and more secure in the future. With that, we'll kind of go in order here. Chad, why don't you give your quick background and we'll run through everyone.
Yeah, sure. My name is Chad Barraford. I'm the technical lead on the THORChain project. I've been with it since, I think it was July 2018, something like that.
That's awesome. Duncan, you want to go next?
Yeah, so I'm CTO of Immunefi. Immunefi is the immune system of crypto. We're really DeFi's last line of defense against attacks. We've got the world's biggest bug bounties.
I love that.
I'm Gavin McDermott, founder and CEO of Nine Realms, and Nine Realms is effectively bringing institutional infrastructure and some of the extension of the protocol to the THORChain ecosystem.
Love that.
Hey there, I'm Rob. So I'm the CEO and co-founder over at Halborn. Halborn is hyper-focused on securing the convergence of CeFi and DeFi. So we typically sit right in the middle, work on the more centralized aspects of penetration testing, technical diligence, and so on. And then DeFi world, working on all sorts of things, including our most recent engagement working with THORChain.
Yeah, I'm Stephen Walbroehl, partners with Rob. I'm the CISO for Halborn, so I do all the technical work and work with the engineers at Halborn to test and secure THORChain, among other blockchain protocols. So I do all the tech stuff and some of the offensive security work.
That's awesome, guys. Thanks for introducing everyone. We've had a lot of great deep dive podcasts on what THORChain is. Disclosure, Delphi is an investor. Have to throw that out there, happily so. Why don't we start, guys, with kind of a recap of what exactly happened to THORChain over the past couple of months hack-wise. Like, let's dive into just an overview on the hack and then we can go from there. Free for whoever wants to grab it.
Yeah, I can start. I'll go into the details at a high level with some technical aspects of the hack. And if you guys are familiar with THORChain, or if not, there's the bridge, essentially they call the Bifrost, that allows transactions between different protocols, was the target of the hack. And what happened the first time was somebody actually figured out that they could wrap one of the bridge's router's contracts, and they sent a message with essentially saying, hey, I'm going to transfer Ether to this and to the wrapped contract, which then forwarded to the bridge, and essentially tricking the bridge into saying that inflating the value of the underlying tokens, and the message value is actually zero. So what happens was this allowed the attacker to kind of manipulate what the price was and enable like arbitrage between a lot of the token prices here, and trick that because of the way that it was parsing the message of the value that was sent. So essentially, by wrapping that router, they were able to send a value, which the router would then allow it to change the price of the token with zero, and then extract it to allow arbitrage and the price slippage there. So there was also another attack that happened right after that with again the memo field. So if you guys ever see the transactions that are occurring, the memo field is actually something that is parsed and split up, and by manipulating the memo field, they were able to almost like inject kind of arbitrary messages to cause different payouts. So it's pretty interesting attack vectors that were done. And right now there's maybe Chad can go into some of the things that happen about halting the validators and not letting some of the flash bots come to do the extraction from it. I know there's a lot of questions around how that approach was handled.
Yeah, I really appreciate the overview, Stephen. Chad, definitely dive in.
Yeah, another way to think about the attacks is, and just to add to what Stephen was just saying, is that somebody was able to figure out a way to trick the Bifrost to think that it received an asset like Ethereum, for example, that it didn't actually receive. The person was able to swap in, with like 10 Ethereum, for example, and then to get something out on the other side, but they never sent in the 10 Ethereum to begin with, right? So they tricked the network to think that it received funds that it didn't actually receive effectively. That's a very simple way of kind of explaining it. And so once that was happening, they were able to, swap large quantities of Ethereum, fake Ethereum really, into the network to receive real tokens out on the other side of it. I think all is said and done, it was like around like $14 million out of those 2 attacks on the network was extrapolated. In these incidents, anybody that was affected by the incidents, any liquidity providers, are all getting made whole again. So in the end, everybody who's like providing liquidity to the network will receive, every coin back to them effectively. That's what's in the process of happening now. Also in the process of happening now is a whole myriad of security-focused changes to the protocol, to the network, to procedures and policies, to expanding the team, to having more internal people to be monitoring security and external people too. It's a pretty wide and long range of action items that the team and the creative community took to better secure the system from any kind of attacks, not just these specific attacks, but any kind of attacks that matter. That we're happy to get more into details of that. I don't know where you want to start and all that kind of stuff.
No, these are great overviews. And guys, I just want to to zoom out a second. Like, I was on your Discord when this was all happening, and I saw the community obviously be shocked by it, but I also saw them come together in a really fast way and try and get to the bottom of this. What would you guys say was the strengths and I guess weaknesses of THORChain's response to these hacks as they happened?
I mean, one of the strengths I'll say was so you have a completely, like it's a loose collection of folks who are operating nodes, and the response time had improved over the quality of those 2 weeks, kind of when the exploits were happening. And what happened over the last 4 to 6 weeks, up to this point in time, is the community response. And I'll speak from our side specifically. We realized some of the gaps, and like, this is actually where networks are made, right? What gets you to this point and then what gets you beyond this point are 2 different things. And so the way that the community showed up in response to these things was something that's kind of blown me away. And so that's one of those areas where if anybody's paying attention to just beyond the surface level, there's some really great work going on that is what's going to allow this protocol to mature. And all things considered, the fact that the Treasury can handle this, and the fact that just the nature of this exploit is what it was, I don't know if there was another event that could have happened so early in this protocol's lifetime that would have allowed all of us to come together to focus and understand security and start changing the posture of the network in this direction without it being a much larger exploit or something that was far more serious. And so from that standpoint, I look at it as like, this is probably the best time for this to happen.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh yeah, I was going to add to that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, to add to the 2 cents he had, I think it's pretty amazing, the Discord community. I've never seen anything like it before, as far as the knowledge level of the people, the people that are running validators and participating in the network. I mean, even us, as we were doing audits, we got ideas from a lot of the people that are participants, or whether they're staking or just in the Discord channel. And I was pretty surprised at the level of knowledge and passion that the community had just to help motivate and drive us, but also give us like ideas and help and assistance for us so we can react faster to it. So there's a lot of individuals that was almost like, hey, you want a job here because you're really good, like you're doing security auditing here because they're invested in the health of the network and finding these problems. So that was really motivating and encouraging as well. And then one thing I would to answer the other side of it, I would say weakness, but not really weakness, because I actually admire the fact that it's almost one of the few like true decentralized type of networks where if there's an incident going on, everybody had to hey, halt, you have to update the systems, manage your validators in a certain way, which shows this is something that is true consensus. It's not like a single admin key that somebody comes in and says, oh, I'm going to hit the pause function and then everything stops. That's centralized, and it gives you a good sense of protection, in case something happens. But in the case of this, it was was decentralized management of handling the network. So I think I admire that, because you don't see that too much in the space right now in this stage.
And really quick side
And
note
to
on
speak
that
with-
one, like on the Nine Realms, like I mean, even you guys, our teams are collaborating now. Like we hadn't talked, 2 months ago, our teams we were operating in the same domain, but we hadn't been talking. And now behind the scenes, there's a whole lot of work going on in terms of like shared test nets, testing environments, ways of, and just like, so the kind of cross-pollination that's now taking place in this ecosystem as a result, it's awesome.
Absolutely.
And
Awesome.
to heap more praise on the community, I haven't seen a community respond to a vulnerability event like this, ever. The passion, the drive, the determination, and the belief in THORChain as a protocol, as a concept. It's really incredible. Just the stick-to-itiveness and the passion that everyone's demonstrated.
To be devil's advocate here, what would you guys say is one thing you wish was improved about the response? Just to like ultra critical, what was one thing you guys would change to do better? Just to play the devil's advocate side of the table.
There's one thing that we were wondering here, and this is not meant to be offensive to anybody in the community here, but it's almost a compliment. Is there's a lot of the smart people that are on there. At first, my sixth sense was like, I think the attacker is definitely somebody in the community because they know too much about it, and because it's so transparent with what we're doing for our auditing about, hey, if we find vulnerabilities, let's talk about it on the Discord publicly. I think that sometimes we should think about that, because if we do find issues and immediately say, hey, here's the issue, then it could possibly be exploited right away before we find a fix for it. So a little bit more discretion in the auditing that we're all doing, as security partners with THORChain, is if we see something, maybe take care of it, find the mitigation, put in the GitHub release, then talk or announce it. So that was a little paranoid about that at first, but I think now we have the right processes to go from finding to patch to disclosure.
Yeah, I mean, I just to attack, protocol that I'm very dearly connected to. Just 1 second. Well, so one thing I think the team had done could have done a lot better on is bringing more eyes into the code earlier on. Really, the number of people who actually look at this code and participate and comment on the changes and all these things is actually very, very, very small quantity of individuals, and that's not a good thing, right? We want more eyes, more smart, brilliant people to get involved. That's one of the things that Bitcoin Core has that's amazing about it. They've had over 800 contributors to that protocol, which is fantastic. That's amazing. It's awesome. And I would love to see kind of THORChain heading in that direction. And unfortunately, we're not there quite yet. But there are some really good action items that was taken over the last few weeks to kind of push it in that direction. We've got a lot more eyes, very smart eyes, looking at the code to find any kind of problems or exploits you can possibly conceive of. I know that some members of the community, some members of the team, myself included, got very tired and was operating on very little hours of sleep, and extremely little hours of sleep. And I certainly made some mistakes myself personally, which I certainly will regret. But we have to move forward. We're going to be moving forward. We're going to be relaunching this network. It's going to be bigger, badder, and stronger than ever was before, for sure.
I really appreciate you
that's
guys
just indicative.
being honest about this. Yeah, no, it's great color. Sorry.
Yeah. Like honestly, that was the biggest thing. It's like the transparency and communication, because there was so much work going on behind the scenes that sometimes the public communication was lacking. And that's honestly one of the commitments that I think everybody here on this call has probably gotten around to, like, okay, in this next phase, we've just got to be a little bit more, just a little bit better in terms of, information throughput and transparency. Everybody was kind of scrambling, and the job is getting done, but that's one of those areas where improvement could definitely could happen.
Yeah, I think we're definitely at first it was like a reactive impulse. We got everybody involved. We're trying to fix the problem and get the network back to how it was. So the next steps, as far as future and to build on those improvements that Chad has just mentioned, would be to have more standards and procedures. Maybe not so like cowboy code, I guess you could say. So you learn a lot from your mistakes, and I think we should take some of the mistakes that have been fixed and now build better security into it. The whole like DevOps methodology of shifting left, and have maybe documentation around this, build like a set of practices as far as security and even code development that THORChain's community and the main developers could take, and that's going to really impact security in the long term, because now if you're following these practices, you'll find issues before they get exploited in the wild.
One question I have for the panel is, you have a hack and it's a inflection point where you're able to put a lot of eyes, a lot of power, Nine Realms, Halborn, Immunefi, the core devs, the community, everyone's looking at the code. How do you guys sustain that level of like depth for the next year, 2 years, 3 years, right? Because like everyone's looking at the code now, but you guys are going to be adding synths. There's going to be new chains added. You're going to have cross-chain value transfer for potentially every chain and be an important piece of infrastructure. How do you maintain like what you guys have now, what you're doing now? How do you make sure that it's the same way a year from now?
I'll throw something out there just to jump on this one, like, because this is actually what I think is the most exciting piece of where we are right now. Think about THORChain as a tier 1 exchange, right? We've got to have the response capability and the delivery in terms of like security posture, all this stuff as a tier 1 exchange, except we're building it from the inside out. So everything is public, whereas a centralized exchange can just kind of hide the mistakes. That delta is an interesting thing to just kind of like be aware of. And so THORChain at its core is kind of a very creative engineering endeavor. And as a result, what's required for security also needs to meet the engineering challenge as creatively. And so kind of going above and beyond that standard is kind of what we have to create here, right? Like that's why some of these things have been stood up. The unique engagement with Halborn is one thing. The bug bounty and like the relationship that's being created with Immunefi going forward, that's another thing. And on the other side, THORSec, that's a specific function that is project specific, that's stood up for the long term to do a very specific thing. In the end, as we start to do this, like because THORChain's topology is kind of varied and it functions as this large L1 decentralized exchange, we've got to create the incentives and the models to secure this thing in a way that a lot of DeFi protocols don't, and that's part of the creative challenge here. But I mean, I wouldn't be on this call if I didn't think we were up to it. And also some of the things that have come together over the last 6 weeks, I think start to show the first prototype steps of that. But also some of the people that are getting involved on this, like we've got the firepower to make this thing very, very in a different way over the next 12 to 18 months. And so I think that's some of the commitment from all these people that are on this call, but also the people who are going to be coming in, is the acknowledgement and recognition of what the nature of this project actually is and can be.
Yeah, there's two things that, oh yeah, go ahead, Rob.
Well, no, I mean, this is why it's been exciting to kind of like, these are kind of like seeds that are now being planted that are only going to sprout over the next many months, many years at this point. So, that's why we were excited to get started with not only our first round of penetration testing, which was absolutely necessary from this incident, but really what we essentially look at as sort of security advisory, which we're essentially calling advanced persistent, like, protection services or whatever, because there's this idea that no matter what, the bad guys are out there and being persistent. They're always there. They're always looking for new holes. They're always waiting for the next upgrade, for the next Git push, for the next repo to be pushed out there, so that they can look for the things that haven't been found just yet. And so the idea being is that now THORChain has basically you're putting together not even really an army. I kind of look at this almost as like they're putting together sort of like a SEAL Team 6 to kind of just go in and infiltrate ahead of the bad guys and make sure that things are secured throughout all the upcoming deployments as well. And so that's why we're excited to be able to basically a ramp up period over the next 3 months of getting some of our, like Halborn's constantly growing. So all of our best new hires, it's like the guys coming in that are fantastic already with Golang and have already have a couple 0 days under their belt of, outside of this, we're putting them directly into this ecosystem. And what you're doing there is you're creating expertise over time. So it's almost like something that is exponentially growing as time goes on.
Yeah, definitely. There's you can consider it like a blessing and a curse with like THORChain, because it does lots of things. There's many bridges, lots of functionality that enables, which is why it's so popular, and there's such a big community around it. But complexity is also the enemy of security. So the more complex and more functionality that you enable, the more holes that can come out, and they become more elusive over time as well as you start adding modules, and the environment grows, and you have these like economical type of attacks that are very hard to find. So it takes a lot of I would say tribal knowledge and becoming familiar with the way the system works. So this is something that when you have a dedicated team, from us at Halborn, engineers training for it, from Immunefi, and everybody's there for the long term, you start to learn how the system works and how THORChain operates, and you've kind of like see all of the hidden functionality behind the scenes, and you become very familiar and intimate with it. And that's where you really hit the nail on the head on like really good security, is you have a dedicated team that knows the complexities and knows the common patterns, and a lot of the different models and compositions that you can do formal verification on. Whereas if you had somebody, okay, we have this new module, go ahead, let's do an audit in 2 weeks. Nobody's going to learn the system in 2 weeks and find all the holes in there. It's massive. The code is complicated. So what THORChain and everybody here on this panel is getting involved with now is the right way to do it, to have experts that are familiar with it for the long term, and month over month train individuals and become THORChain offensive engineers that know how to find these issues before bad guys do.
Yeah, no, it's great context. And I want to talk a bit about Immunefi, Duncan. It's a different approach to finding bugs. You guys hit the ground really hard, really fast. Give us a sense of what Immunefi is and how you guys got engaged with THORChain.
Yeah, so it really is a different follow-on security approach to traditional auditing, totally complementary to that system. The idea here is your independent hackers bring a fresh mindset to these sorts of things. We are seeing people surfacing novel kinds of attacks through Immunefi. It's also a way of tilting economic skills in favor of the project, right? I'm sure everybody knows that the hacker of the first exploit, published that a 10% bounty could have prevented that. I mean, that's basically Immunefi's bread and butter, right? The idea is, you post that 10% bounty, black hats take notice and they go, you know what? I'll take 10% rather than 100% because it's clean money. So as far as our involvement, my co-founder Traven got involved with THORChain pretty much immediately after the attacks. Really expedited our onboarding process to tailor that bug bounty program to THORChain's needs. Provide a strong front to the community and really assure everyone that THORChain does take security seriously, and they're going to put their money where their mouth is.
Actually, that's an area to kind of clear the air too. Like, Immunefi stood up immediately as soon as that. It's like day zero of the hack. Traven was on the line and we were getting things stood up, and like that was one of the areas where, as the community was starting to surface things and talk about exploits in the Discord channels, there was a lot of noise. We were getting that stood up. So I know there was a little bit of like, some people were like, what's the nature of the bug bounty program? But one thing is I think we smoothed things out as fast as possible, but really that was only possible because Immunefi stood up so quickly and expedited the process. I think it happened on a Friday, and we were on the line with Traven Friday night, Saturday, and by Sunday, the proposal was ready to go and everything was just beautiful. So like, just awesome work, you guys.
Yeah, no, I mean, hands out to both of you guys. I mean, Immunefi and Halborn, you guys got started quick, and THORChain's better to have both of your teams kind of jamming this down and fixing it. It's amazing. I'd love to chat a bit about THORSec. Let's dive in there.
Yeah. So on the nine realms side, that was kind of like realizing that the security of this network kind of needs something a little bit beyond the typical engagement, and we kind of saw that coming together. We had some friends in our network who were, world-class white hat hackers. I mean, they're at the top of the board with some network exploits, and that's how they've made their living, and just they do it for fun. But they're two guys who are just extraordinarily good. They've been interested in THORChain for a long time, and as this actually happened, this kind of provided the fertile soil for us to create kind of this unique thing called THORSec, where we'd have kind of two world-class white hatters who would focus on effectively being offensive security, kind of like Halborn was saying. So we've got this team now that is reviewing every pull request. They're, talking with Chad and the core team on a daily basis. helping set up, environments for testing and exploits and everything that's going through. So as, new security features and new modules and things get plugged into THORChain, we can have a new type of testing environment for doing things. This becomes useful to everybody, Halborn, us, everyone. And so we looked at it kind of from our perspective of, we've got the resources. These guys are, some of the best in the world as well, and they want to focus here. And so it made sense to just kind of create this unique function. If you're talking about a tier 1 centralized exchange, they'd have a security team. And so we looked at it as, well, we need something then that is funded by the treasury, that is a part of the core protocol, but it's distinct from the guys writing the core code. So they think about it differently. They think about it from the security standpoint. And then there's a really tight connection, but it's a loose coupling. So it's just basically the THORChain like focused security aspect that will grow over time as the security surface, or as the surface of the protocol grows. But as a starting point, these guys are just quite capable. So they're, some of the best in the world. And so now that we have this kind of like, we've got this mesh of security kind of wrapping THORChain from an array of perspectives. And so THORSec was kind of our approach to, to just throwing something into the mix that would become a core part of the protocol going forward.
I like how you mentioned the array of a mix of things too, because Rob and I at Halborn, we always say that pen testing and offensive security is more of like an art form. Everybody has their own canvas, their own methodologies, their way of doing things, and the more perspectives you have, of bringing the experience, from 9Realms, or Immunefi, Halborn, and anybody else, you're going to get different attack patterns and different attack services. So because of that perspective and the experience that people bring, you're going to get way more coverage. So having that diversity is going to be huge in the long run as well.
No, I totally agree. Having spectrum is really important, because you have white hat, like A+ devs within the community with THORSec, you have Halborn, you guys are incredible, and then you have the community with Immunefi. I guess my question for you guys is, it's hard to talk about results since you guys have all started, because it's highly technical and you don't want to share anything that could be exploited somewhere else. But can you guys all give a taste of, I guess, your work so far? Like if somebody boss came to you and said, hey, what have you guys done for THORChain lately? What would be the answer there?
Well, so on the team, by the way, too, Trailbit's also been finishing up their own audit of the network as well. So we have Halborn, you have the THORSec, you have Trailbits, you have a lot of different hands going into it. But one of the things that I've been involved with is building these kind of blanketed protections for the protocol itself. So the network now checks for insolvency. So if somebody sends in like a fake ETH like last time, right, the network can instantly detect that, hey, we thought we got 15 ETH from this guy, but we really didn't get anything. And so let's just halt everything, figure out what the problem is, and then resume things when the chain autonomous does it on its own without any human interaction whatsoever. That's the first one. That's kind of protecting the ingress. The outgress of funds getting sent out, there's a new feature being added where when there's a large volume of trades happening through the network, it actually slows down those trades, or slows down the output of those trades. Can slow a trade up to an hour effectively. And that gives the community time that if some sort of attack happens and someone's trying to pull out $8 million out of the network for some reason or whatever, the network would just naturally just slow itself down, giving opportunity for the community to see what's happening. Like, oh, wait, this is an attack. Let's, come together. Let's, stop the attack from happening so they don't actually pull out any funds out of the network, hopefully. These approaches are more like a catch-all approach to any type of exploits you might find. If you're trying to find every single exploit, you may or may not find them, and you don't know how many there are, right? Inherently, you never know, right? No matter what you do. But now we have these systems in place that will protect the network from a whole myriad of possible attack vectors, whether you're doing this way or that way on this chain or that chain, doesn't matter. Vast majority of situations, these two blanketed protections can protect the network from such exploits.
Yeah, one thing that Halborn did, a unique approach that helped us find some issues is, it's one thing to look through the code and see what it's doing and find vulnerabilities, so like static analysis. But we actually realized, hey, we need to create our own validator and connect it to like the chaos net and interact with it dynamically. So our expertise, like Rob mentioned before, there's like the CFI and DeFi. We have a lot of enterprise security experience and DevOps as well. So we created our own validator infrastructure And part of the scope that we're doing, besides a lot of the contract and the code, is looking at things like the Kubernetes deployments and the node deployers and the way that these validators are created and looking. So when we were going through that, there's a few issues that we could see. Again, this might be an insecure way to deploy nodes, or it's not hardened correctly. So providing extra findings just around the security of the infrastructure, not just the consensus or the code itself. So now interacting with it dynamically and attacking something on a live network and seeing how it responds has been huge for us as well. So yeah, we're participating in the network and adding funds to find those things that you can't. It's very hard to imagine how it would react in a live environment. And now we're kind of getting our hands in there and try to wrangle the beast now, just live on the network.
Also, what's completely like in every other industry outside of this blockchain ecosystem, it's absolutely nuts. Like if you're in the middle of doing a penetration test, none of that has ever seen the light of day. If you're penetration testing the infrastructure of a bank, you're keeping that throughout the entire process internally. Meanwhile, we're completely flipping this on its head with our engagement with THORChain, where literally our penetration test, our Gantt chart, our progress, our entire scope is completely public. In fact, it's tweeted weekly. So, even in the blockchain industry, it's not a very normal thing where you actually see every day what auditors are doing. So that's just from like a high level, like here's precisely what's being worked on. And then I'm trying to think of like the positive terminology around like death by 1,000 cuts, right? Because it's this idea that like every single day we keep on having findings and talking internally with the team about like, all right, we're just adding and compiling to the report. So I feel like just every day, it's just like a ton of little things that continue to just stack up at the end of this, even just this first like 6-week engagement.
The
it's
phrase
really
I would
great
use
having
is,
the access to
with
the
enough
devs too.
Pardon me. The phrase I would use is, with enough eyes, all bugs are shallow. That's really Immunefi's approach to it, right? We're bringing the largest number of eyes for a dollar amount that makes sense of protocol.
Yeah, for sure. And it's having direct access to, talking with the developers and the architects and any of the community members helps expedite what we're doing too. So if we maybe have a sixth sense, like, oh, I think this might be an issue here, rather than spending a lot of time independently doing something and then, a couple weeks later giving the report, you'd be like, hey, I'm trying this. Has anybody else tested this before? Like, hey, the guys in Trail of Bits or Immunefi, like, we want to look at the memo for some reason, try this. Have you done this yet? Or what's your take on it? And they can almost say like, oh yeah, it's a good idea. Or like, oh no, I tried this before. There's a protection that is put in here, so don't worry about it. Now we're like, oh, okay, now we can kind of react with a lot of agility and take care of the things that actually need to be looked at, rather than spending countless nights just kind of like hacking away at something and hit like a roadblock or a dead end.
No, that's really important. I guess my dumb non-dev question for you guys is, you guys are like Chad mentioned the solvency checker. You guys are adding a lot of protections in place. Like, does that kind of make the system even more complex and like introduce, crazy intense, like high level type bugs down the road? Like, how does the system manage all of the safeguards and how they interact with each other? And maybe I'm just not thinking about it the right way, but I want to stay as the devil's advocate here.
No, it's a good question to ask. So the simple answer is that, yeah, it does add slightly more complexity, and it can introduce like new bugs into the system, right? And that's why you need to do testing internally right now. We're testing in testnet very soon this week and seeing how that goes. We're getting our friends and partners around the world to start slamming on it, finding any bugs if there are any, and then adjusting as we need to. Managing complexity is always a difficult thing in any software project in general. In a crypto project, it's more difficult typically because crypto projects tend to be much more complicated to write in code than Web 2 stacks, in a matter of speaking. And in THORChain's case, it's considerably more, because THORChain is very, very complicated protocol, much more complicated than probably any and all DeFi projects out there, I would say. I'll say that with a good amount of confidence too.
I agree with you. I'll
so-
support that.
Yeah, Halborn's, take a look at the code. They see how very complex it is. I mean, even TSS thresholds by itself, just TSS thresholds by itself is more complicated than most DeFi products out there. Just that one aspect by itself. Not to mention the rest of like Thor node itself, Bifrost, manipulating, or not moving, but interfacing with multiple chains, protecting yourself against double spends and reorgs and all sorts of crazy situations, and doing that completely autonomously. Like that's mind-numbingly difficult and complex. But to your point, Tom, like it does add slightly more complexity, not considerably more. Like for example, like the delayed outbounds is like adding a couple hundred lines of code, for example. But it's important because the question always should be: is the return on investment worth the additional complexity? How much complexity do you add, and how much value do you get out of it? Right now, on the delayed outbound transactions kind of feature we're talking about before, that's in part designed to say that if somebody did attack the system, they would extrapolate, and were successful to do so, they would extrapolate less value in funds than if they just went to Immunefi and say, "Hey, I got a bug, can I have my $300,000 bug bounty?" If they were to actually attack the network, they would get like maybe like 250,000 or 200,000 or some number. And this code is designed to kind of help protect the network from that kind of case of scenario. So it does add some complexity, but I would argue that complexity is warranted given how much value and security that it kind of cakes into the network.
You also get a reputational. You get reputational benefits from that as well too, not just financial. Is a black hat hacking the network and stealing it and having all the updates about the THORChain was hacked. That's it's a lot better to have a white hat or a bug bounty to discover that just for the optics of it. That adds a value to long term.
Yeah, and I would say if you are an attacker, honestly, at this point, it's probably more valuable to you to actually be a white hat. You actually make more money as a white hat than you would as a black hat attacking this network, probably. So come with us, help us, you'll get paid, all these things. Like, it's a great opportunity for you.
Well, and your peers are now other world-class white hatters who have kind of like flipped their own hats in their time, which is another thing to say. But there's another there's another salient bit to distill here, which is the nature of like what's going to come out of the testing, right? Like Chad's talking about testing. Setting up even the environment to test for exploits and things like that every time you roll something out, the state of cross-chain DeFi testing tools is absolutely behind where it needs to be just for the entire ecology, flat out. And so this project is going to push that. And so like part of what we're all engaged in right now is also creating this unique kind of test environment where you can spin up these different things, and you can have the ability to test this code in a different way, because where we are and where we're going are two different places. And so we're effectively going to have to build our own roads, which is, that'll benefit everybody.
Yeah, back to Tom's question about the complexity too, of how do you manage this like dynamic changing environment. There's really two approaches for it. And one of them is looking at it by components, which we kind of started that, like let's hone in on just the code here. But then there's the whole composability aspect of it, where all right, when you look at this one, like a router or the Bifrost or the TSS alone, there's no vulnerabilities. Code looks fine, it's working as expected. But once you introduce the way it's used in context with the other components, that's when the vulnerabilities come. And composability is very difficult because it's not just something about like a scan or the way that the code is, but it's actually functional type of issues, and that requires understanding and also requires on state of the network at the time too. If you think a lot of like these DeFi type hacks where it's like flash loan attacks or anything, that all depends on how much liquidity is on there at a certain moment and how much can you borrow and how much is outstanding, and it's something that can't really be tested, but more about what the risk level is, and do you have mitigating controls put there to either react or defend against that risk. So I think that's like where we're going with those blanket type of mitigating controls that Chad was mentioning earlier, and things that we do as we stand up and work with the infrastructure live.
No, that's really helpful context, guys. And continuing on my questions on the other side of the table, like Do you guys think that THORChain lost ground during this, or do you think THORChain is going to be ever hardened? And I asked that question in the context of the community, and also in the context of, THORChain is a pretty critical piece of infrastructure, in my opinion. You guys are building real, actual, trustless cross-chain value transfer. It's important. And to Halborn's point earlier, it's not a closed bank, right? You're building everything out in the open. It's very important that it is secure. But I am curious, and maybe I'll direct this towards Chad. What's your take on the community here? Is the community as strong as it was, stronger, less strong? Because it's a critical piece when something, takes a while to fix and to harden.
Yeah, absolutely. To speak objectively and honestly, I think when the attacks first happened, there was this kind of moment of pile on, right? That we were seeing on Twitter, we were seeing all these kind of mediums, even Max Kaiser got a few, jabs into the into the fray here, and so it did feel like a dark hour, right, for the project for sure. And I think a lot of people in the community were definitely feeling that in the beginning. But I also do feel like that the strong individuals that we have within this community came together in a way to actually to iterate and to say, let's take a step. And Gavin was like a good example of this. Just coming in, it's like, let's take a step back. Let's reevaluate everything. Let's bring a lot more hands into it. Let's bring a lot more people into it. And inevitably, the result is this code is, and the community is extremely much more hardened than it was before. I would argue a good magnitude larger than it was before in that sense. The community is definitely behind it in a very strong and very obvious way. We're seeing that today through social media, but also in private channels. People are talking to me, and absolutely people are much more hardened in their view. And I would argue that the project is definitely in a much better position today than it was, the day before the attacks actually happened. Even though the network hasn't fully restarted yet, it's not doing trading quite yet, I can see kind of the road down the street and where the project is heading in general. I'm very happy and very excited to see where the project is going. And I can just see a clear path that we're going to be a much, much better place in a few weeks than we were a few weeks before.
No, Chad, I really appreciate the authentic answer there. Oh, sorry, keep going.
Oh yeah, no, I completely agree with that too. And there's a story behind it where it kind of validates what Chad's saying too. A couple of years ago or a year ago when GoDaddy, got a big hack, and a lot of my friends were coming up to me saying "Oh, GoDaddy just got hacked. Should I move my domain, to somewhere else?" I'm like, actually now GoDaddy is probably the most secure domain you could be on because when something, unfortunately, when an incident happens, people, whether it's actually technical people or management or executives, now all of a sudden security is front and center in their mind, and investment comes in, and skills come in, and protection come in, and you get the highest level of security maturity after an incident. So I would definitely say that's the case with this too, where now the response that we have and all of the team members, communities, and the companies involved to help protect us and get the eyes on it, THORChain is absolutely probably in the strongest position from a security standpoint right now.
No, I love that. And guys, one other question I had for you. How do you guys all, we have Trail of Bits, we have Halborn, we have 9 Realms, we have Immunefi, we have the core devs. How do you guys all coordinate in a way that's productive for all of you? How do you, chat problems? What if you find the same bug, which would be pretty interesting too? How does that happen?
Well,
finding the same bug is absolutely something that's happened.
Discord.
Yeah. Look. I think at this moment, Halborn's working on a couple dozen projects at any given time with our team that it's constantly growing, and there isn't a single other project that we work on at this moment where we are in direct contact with other auditing firms, other kind of firms that we normally kind of be vying for similar forms of business with. So it's been really eye-opening and amazing to basically request from the team, right when we got hired to come in, it was here's a crazy idea. What if you throw us all into the same room together, and then we kind of collaborate while we're doing our separate things? What do we kind of collaborate as well? And let's just see what happens. And it's been amazing just to constantly learn, we're learning every day from each other at this point, and new relationships are being formed. So it's really, it's as simple as the fact that there is a separate like private Discord channel where we are having these conversations. But a lot of it's very public as well. So
yeah, it all of a sudden turns into a capture the flag event, right? As we hackers like to do it. It also makes us, it's a bit encouraging too, because we are peers in this industry, and having multiple eyes on it is recommended. We always we're never offended by anybody saying like, oh, we want a second opinion on something, or have another auditor come in. That means that they actually take security very seriously. So it's admirable, and the results are going to be speaking for themselves pretty much from this, and working directly with this. It's not like we're trying to get the business from our competitors. Like, okay, great. No, it's not about that. We're both here to help THORChain become more secure, and it turns into a mix of assistance towards like a friendly competition in a way. It's like, oh, if we find this bug, like, hey, we need to like announce it right away too, so we look cool for the credit for it. But also it may be that they already found it and now we're wasting our time and resources on it. So I mean, the whole process of having multiple auditors communicate with each other on this, I think it's the positives are just speak for themselves. It's been a very validating and fun experience as well.
And one of the benefits is like, we're going to see the benefits of this, I think, expand over time. Because like, we're just now getting to the place over the last month plus where we're like, we all share context and language. And that's taken a long time to even build up. If Chad was the one coming in here with all this context and understanding, like we're all getting ramped up into this thing. And that just starts to pay dividends over the long haul. Like this is all just kind of getting turned on, but it's like, we're going to see that really over the benefit of that shake out, as this thing starts to ramp back up.
Yeah, that's something that I've been really happy about, and is to see the context that I have in the code base, being somebody who one of the deeper understandings of the code base, getting more eyes and more brains into it, and then spending my time to talk to, answer questions, train, get more mind share of this code base and how it functions, how it works, to get more people, whether it's Halborn, whether it's Trail of Bits, whether it's THORSec, all these different separate teams, all these different individuals, and deepen their understanding of how this very difficult and very complex code base actually functions underneath the hood, so that it's not just me and one other guy, so to speak, who have a full idea of how this code actually works. There's a whole myriad of teams that are kind of deepening their understanding, just to make it even more of a larger community around the project from a dev perspective.
So guys, let's switch to some fun stuff. What is the roadmap, release schedule? What should people look out for? What's next?
Yeah, so the team, along with the community, has worked very hard to get the network, back up and running. It's a multi-phase approach. It's a little bit at a time, taking our time and doing it right. The first phase was just to get the chain up and THORChain up itself, the chain itself, and just committing blocks. All functionality, almost all functionality, was just disabled, just to get the chain up and committing blocks and having block rewards being emitted to LPs and node operators as well. The second part was to kind of enable THORChain specific functionality, like sending rune and adding bond or unbonding and these kind of things, adding it to the THORChain network itself. That's phase 2, which has already been done. And then phase 3, which we're in now, is to re-enable Bifrost and to start just one chain, the BNB chain, first, and get that one up and running, trading. People can add liquidity, withdraw liquidity, whatever they want to do. That's the current phase that we're, as a community, working on. And so I think this week it'll be deployed to the new changes to make that possible to be deployed to testnet. Once it has validated all that, then and everything looks good, if there's any bugs, then we'll go ahead and fix them, patch them, continue on. Then the next phase of that is opening up the UTXO based chain. So that's Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, Litecoin, for example. And then the next one after that is the biggest, baddest, and most difficult and complex one, which is Ethereum, largely because it has ACE, which is arbitrary code execution, which makes it more difficult to secure and lock down in a sense. But we're leaving the baddest for the last in a sense, to get the chain up and running.
That's awesome. No, I'm really excited. And I want to zoom out as we close out here. I want to talk to you guys. You guys are all pretty intimately involved with THORChain, the community, and the vision here. I've already said that we're an investor, and happily so, over the past several years. But so we have our own views. But what does THORChain mean to you guys today? And I'd be interested to hear how it's changed, because it's changed a lot since the initial testnet. Now that we have a real multi-chain future, people aping into Avalanche, Solana NFTs in the last week, maybe not Avalanche NFTs yet, but Avalanche DeFi. But people aping into plays, it just shows that a cross-chain future is now a reality, right? Something like THORChain has to exist, right? And it has to exist at a grand scale. But I'd love to kind of get everyone's thoughts on what THORChain means to them, and I guess their future for multi-chain, for their thoughts on it.
For me, I think THORChain is setting an example that's very almost like brave. Like when you think of just Thor, the character itself, from Marvel, or the Norse god, he's just going out there and smacking the hammer down. And I think that's what we're doing here, is like setting that. It's so transparent and so public, and it's setting an example of like, we're doing this because we're serious about it. We're not gonna, give up like, oh, we got hacked, it's all over. It's like, no, we'll persist. This is just whatever, brush your shoulders off, go forward, and everybody's getting involved. We get through this and come out stronger. And it's gonna give a lot more like faith into the network as a whole. And they always say that there's no such thing as bad publicity either. So I think that after this is all done and we're back to normal, it's going to be such a great and long-term thing that's going to be making THORChain persist for many years to come.
Absolutely. Anybody else have any closing thoughts before we close out?
Yeah, I think for me, to take a more esoteric perspective, maybe, THORChain has a lot of technological innovations to it that they're just doing, that things that nobody's ever done before, right? Whether that's using threshold signatures to lock up hundreds of millions of dollars, or even protecting against MEV attacks, for example. Like, there's all sorts of things actually happening within the stack that are innovative. But for me, what I actually see the value of THORChain out from a more higher level perspective is actually it's a human rights push, right? Like Bitcoin was to me the first human right that was granted to all peoples across the entire planet, no matter what side of an imaginary line that you happen to be born on. You actually had for the first time in human history, everybody had access to a basic inalienable human right, which was the ability to hold your own wealth in a completely sovereign way. Like, that was like huge. I don't think a lot of people recognize how massive of a contribution to humanity Bitcoin was, right? That was absolutely astonishing. And I think THORChain is just taking that idea, moving just a little bit further, and saying that not only can you store your own wealth, as Bitcoin did, but you can actually exchange your wealth to another asset of your choosing, right? Without being requiring some sort of entity in the middle of it all to allow you to do it or not allow you to do it, or these kind of things. It's actually a massive push for human rights, and it's partially what gets me excited about the project, is the idea that no matter where you are on the planet, you can actually transact and move your assets from one chain to another chain. You can actually provide whatever value you have at whatever amounts you have into a system, and get a 30, 40, 50% APY. Like, that's amazing, without needing to KYC or not. It doesn't matter if you're a man, woman, black, white, who gives a fuck? Sorry for swearing, but like, who cares? Like that's a massive thing. Like, that's the biggest movement in income equality the world has ever seen. That is an absolutely massive thing, and we should all be applauding this. We should all be like getting behind this. This is a world shifting technology, not just like THORChain, but Bitcoin and other contributors to this space. It's absolutely astonishing, and I'm super proud to be a part of it.
Chad, as a Bitcoin maximalist myself, first of all, I got goosebumps. Thank you for that. My favorite quote, you may have heard it before, if not, but they always say that fiat is the government's money, gold is God's money, and Bitcoin and THORChain is the people's money. And it's self-sovereignty and giving to it. So I think that's right in line with the spirit and the principles that you just went through.
Yeah, guys, this is incredible. I really appreciate like the authentic and kind of devil's advocate kind of conversation here. I'm really excited for THORChain. I do think it's a critical piece of infrastructure, and to have Trail of Bits, obviously not here, but shout out to you guys as well. to have Immunefi, to have 9 Realms, to have Halborn, to have the core devs. It really is nice to see you guys all come together to harden the protocol. So I am very excited for you guys. Shout out for going through all those sleepless nights to clear things out when it happened. But I really appreciate you guys all coming on tonight.
Thanks, Tom.
Here's a parting note on that side. It's like, if you guys think the last 12, 18 months was good, just wait till the next 12, 18. Like, this is where it happens.
Absolutely.
Hell yeah. Excited, guys. We'll talk soon.
Right.